Welcome, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown. And today I want to help people understand, non-professional people who are not in the field of profiling or in investigative work, what exactly is crime linkage? How do you understand it? How do you understand it? Well, in this case, these cases over here, we have the Rachel Morin case. She was murdered in Bel Air, Maryland on August 5th, 2023. And then just recently, on the 22nd of February, we have Laken Riley, who was murdered down at the University of Georgia in Athens. And both of these women were murdered on jogging paths, bike paths, walking paths, whatever you'd like to call it. They were alone, off for just a run. Both were daylight hours. She was murdered during the day, and she was murdered in the evening, but still it was summertime for her, so it was light out. And they were both brutally murdered, and what appears to be a blitz attack. Appears to be, because I don't have absolute proof of that, but they were both beaten terribly, both in the head. And they say that both of these women, their skulls and their faces were, I won't say obliterated, but pretty badly damaged, because again, I don't have the access to autopsy photos. Were these connected? And what happened? Of course, now we do know that they are not connected. This guy is connected to the Rachel Morin case. Now, he was 6 months prior, in March, in LA, committed a home invasion, and he supposedly, allegedly, I should say allegedly, sexually assaulted a person in that house. And he was seen leaving the house with his shirt off and his shoes in his hand, and somebody kind of pushing him out the door. It's very strange. But the DNA from this case matched the DNA in the Rachel Morin case, which was wonderful, in the sense at least there is a real suspect here. This went through CODIS, the FBI's CODIS system. So they put the DNA, because he left DNA at the scene, a sloppy serial killer, and he is a serial killer. And her attacker is also a serial killer, because this is just not the kind of thing you do once. So we don't know if her killer did it before, or will do it again, or has done it again. And we don't know whether her killer did it before, but probably not after her, because he's now in custody. However, all right, so we got lucky in the sense that this DNA was left there, and it matched this guy from a crime in LA, which is all the way across the country, 6 months prior. Now, when she was assaulted in a very, very similar way to Rachel Morin, and this guy was caught. His name is Jose Ibarra. He's from Venezuela. He's an illegal immigrant from Venezuela, who moved down to Georgia because his brother lived down there, and he lived very close to the crime scene. And there's a lot of evidence supposedly connecting him. CCTV, witness reports, him throwing away bloody clothing. I'm not getting into the case, but it looks like he's pretty much the guy who did it. All right, so when it came out that he committed this crime against Laken, what happened was people started jumping to conclusions, saying, aha, there we go, Hispanic guy. This guy must be this guy. So this guy must have killed Rachel as well. And immediately I'm like, wait, step back, everybody. Step back with this over speculation that these two guys are the same guy. And so here's where people do not understand how crime linkage works and how crime works in general. Now, we take a look at this case. Yes, it's very similar in methodology. All right, very similar. And it appears the guy was both this guy and this guy accessed these paths, don't appear to have used a vehicle to get to the locations, and they were either hiding out or walking about or whatever they were doing on that path. We cannot say whether they've been doing reconnaissance there before, or whether this was just a lucky moment, or both. But here we had a young woman coming down the path, And they're both like, oh, great. My opportunity. Look both ways. Nobody's watching. Got it. Brutally attack and commit their crime. I want to tell you, this type of crime is not unusual. If you look back through cases over the years, especially in as large an area as the United States of America, you're going to find so many women who have been assaulted on bike paths and jogging paths and hiking trails. And a good portion of them have been brutally beaten with whatever object, a rock, maybe the guy had a big stick, maybe he brought a police baton with him or something, whatever, we don't know. But he beats women because it's an easy way to get them to submit quickly. And it works if you don't have a gun or a knife, or you don't want to use a gun or a knife. That works perfectly fine. A nice rock, because it's easy to subdue somebody when you slam them in the head. It doesn't take a lot of talent. So we have serial killers who use that methodology. They also pick parks and walking paths and jogging trails because there's isolated moments on them. Now, some are more isolated than others, and you always wonder, well, these two were not highly isolated paths. They were where other people also jogged, walked their dogs. So the paths weren't necessarily empty. Now, much of the time when you have attacks on these kind of paths, it happens at dawn or dusk. People get up in the morning and say, I'm going to go run before work. And they run when it's very quiet and it's not very light out. And the paths do become more isolated, and it's much more dangerous to run at that time, at dusk. Then you have people who get off of work, have the same thing. Well, before I go home, and especially if it's in the winter time when it's going to get dark earlier, they go running at dusk. So dawn and dusk will do you in. Very dangerous times to go as a female on these isolated paths. Now, what the guy can do is simply, it might be that he's been on the path before and missed opportunities. He had a possibility, but then he looked around and saw somebody was coming down the way with their little puppy. And he's like, okay, I can't do that. And some woman runs off, not realizing she was about 1 minute from being murdered. She had no clue. She goes on with her life. But the next day, he could be at that same location, look both ways down a path, see nobody. Here comes the girl running by herself. And all he has to do is jump out and hit her on the head and drag her off. And that's it. It's a very common crime. And if you go into, let's say, for example, ViCAP. ViCAP is a violent program of criminals. They look at all the violent crimes of criminals and try to determine across the country in the United States whether these crimes are connected. And it can be serial rapists, it can be serial killers, and they should be linked together in the sense that some serial killers also are serial rapists. Some go from serial rape to serial killing. Some actually go back to serial rape after serial killing. Some mix it up. It's a violent sexual homicide for the most part, although all serial killings don't necessarily have a sexual component to it, that is noted. But you got these guys across the country committing this kind of crime. So what happens is when a crime like this is committed, the homicide detective can enter into ViCAP all the details of the crime, what the method of operation was, the MO, modus operandi. It's got 3 different names, but that they can put in there. How did it happen? Hit over the head with a rock. And these are the things that happened during the crime, the location of the crime, any witness reports. All of this goes into ViCAP with the hope that it will link to other crimes that are very similar. Problem is, there are so many that are very similar, it's really hard to say that they're connected because it's a common method of committing a sexual homicide. Unless you have an actual witness, which in this case they did, and in this case, there's some video, you have no clue who it is. So you have the style of crime, shall we call it a style, and then that's it. Unless you've got DNA. Now, DNA, of course, you put that in a CODIS, and if DNA links to somebody else, bingo. If you've got a serial killer who left DNA here and then another serial homicide over here, and that DNA linked, well, eureka, you got the guy. So DNA is your number one crime linkage because it's hard to deny. But once you don't have DNA to link to the crimes, the question is which of the crimes are linked. And we have another problem. So you take an MO. In this case, the girls were hit over the head, brutally beaten in a blitz attack. But does that mean that these two guys would never use another method? If you look at some histories of serial killers, some of them go from outside to inside. Some of them go from knives to bludgeoning, or some go just from strangling to, they change up. Why do they do that? Well, sometimes it's because it happens to be whatever method is available to them. Maybe they would like to use a gun and hold it on a woman and say, follow me, or go this way. Like we see in the Delphi crimes. The guy had a gun, he said, down the hill, and he was able to control them that way. What the guy doesn't have a gun. So he has a knife. So he decides he's going to use a knife in the crime, but dang it, he cut himself on that crime. So the next crime, he decides not to use a knife. He's just going to strangle because he figures that's less, it's not going to cut him up. Or he decides that I'm going to hit her over the head with a baseball bat. There's all kinds of methodologies that aren't necessarily going to be the same. A guy is not going to use the same MO every single crime. The same is true with victims. What can you say about these women? What are they? What do they have in common? Well, some people say they're both Caucasian. Okay. One has dark hair, one has blonde hair. One is younger, one is older. She's a mother of 5. She's a college student. Do you think the guy on the trail really gives a crap? No, he doesn't. All he cares about is he's got a victim. Now, it's true, he might not choose certain victims. If he's waiting on the side of the trail and a woman comes along and I always say this is safety, and she's working hard on her new diet program, and she's getting her walk in, and she weighs 350 pounds, she's probably not going to be a victim. Why? Because it's not a trophy woman, which a lot of serial killers do like, a thin, young, modelish looking girl, if they can get it. 350 pounds, hard to deal with as far as managing the body. If she's wearing jeans, hard to get the jeans off. That's just reality. So like I say, you might be safer if you're a little overweight. And then the size, they would prefer a smaller girl than a 6'2" basketball player. Easier again to manage a small girl. And if they're pretty, they prefer that. Sometimes they're like, I'm on this trail. A pretty girl got away. Another pretty girl got away. Well, I don't think this girl's as good looking, but what the heck? It's kind of like a guy at the end of the night at the bar. You take what you can get at a certain point. So their MO will change. Their victim will change, depending on where they live. That race is not a factor. People aren't. These guys, they're Hispanic. They're not necessarily picking non-Hispanic women to kill because they have some rage against non-Hispanic women. It just may be the location they're in. That's who is available to them. It used to be that they would say, for example, if a white woman was killed, that it was a white serial killer. And that used to be more true if you go back 50 years just because of the demographics. You got a lot of white people living in one area, and a woman gets killed, the guy probably lives in the area, because most serial killers do kill where they live or where they work, unless they're truckers or something and they're really moving around. And then you have a black area of town, and in that area, if you have a black woman killed, probably is a black serial killer, because again, that's who lives there, and they're convenient. Over time, with a mixture of demographics, where you have a mixture of Caucasian and black and Hispanic and Asian, whatever, now they're like, okay, smorgasbord. I can go for all kinds of ladies. And sometimes they're not even ladies. Sometimes they'll mix up the male, female too, as victims. So you cannot absolutely go with MO, cannot absolutely go with even sex as far as that goes. All depends on the killer, right? So, or even age. There are some who they might have broken into somebody's house and killed raped and murdered an 80-year-old woman, and then a few months later they kill a 16-year-old. So this gets confusing. And if you're an investigator on cases and you're looking through, going to ViCAP to try to find similar cases, it's tough. It's tough. It's not as easy as people think. Here's an example from ViCAP. Let me show you. It started in 1985. I've always wondered about the success rate of it. One, somebody's got to do all the work to fill out the forms, and apparently, for years, a lot of detectives are like, I don't have time for this crap, and they just didn't do it. I don't know how often it is properly done, but here's a statement from the FBI. It says, since 1985, over 4,000 law enforcement agencies have submitted more than 90,000 individual cases. For privacy reasons, we can't discuss operational successes. Really? Oh, isn't that how you determine whether a program is any good or not? You should have very good proof of operational successes. Then they say this, but we can tell you there have been untold numbers of leads generated for cases that would have otherwise gone cold. Countless suspects have been identified. Okay, leads and a suspect. Did that solve the case? Were they the right leads? Were they the right suspects? I don't know. I don't have a problem with ViCAP existing. I think it's a great idea. I just would like to see how well it's used. I want to know the success rate. I think that's very important. Another version of ViCAP I've never seen done and I would like done is I would like in any crime like this, let's say for Rachel's crime, any person in the area that they've interviewed should go into a database just in case that guy's interviewed in another case. Now, he's not necessarily a suspect. He could be the security guard. He could be a guy who said, oh, well, I saw her at this particular time. Could be a witness. But if that witness shows up in 3 other cases as a witness, you might want to look at the guy. So it's very hard to link this kind of case together. Now, sometimes they will talk about signature, which is another, it's like I always consider that a very Squirrelian term, which I don't really approve of. So in a lot of serial killer stuff, they talk about signature all the time. Not what he did to commit the crime, but what he felt during that crime, why he did what he did, what his thing was, what he got off on. So when you see serial killer movies, you always got something like he put an X on all the girls' heads, or he plays some kind of operatic music when he kills them, and leaves what back in the day, let's see, a tape or a CD at the scene of every one of the crimes because he cannot kill without hearing that music. Okay, this doesn't happen in real life. Most crimes are pretty basic. They include an assault and a sexual homicide. An assault, usually some sort of sex crime in there, a rape. The rape can be vaginal, anal. It can be oral. It can be masturbatory. It could be a bunch of stuff. And again, the guy doesn't necessarily do the same thing every time, depending on his time frame and whatever's going on. Or these did it this way, but now he's getting bored of that, so now he's going to add a little something else to it. Signature, unless it's extraordinarily rare. I mean, it is extraordinarily rare, but unless it's something really peculiar, like I'm trying to think of somebody who really in real life had well, Jack the Ripper, he liked to take innards out of ladies. I think that's kind of signature. He was kind of, that gave him a big thrill, removing their insides. I believe he was a butcher. So I think he liked doing it on real people instead of animals. So that would be, I would say, a true signature. I mean, sometimes people, the Boston Strangle supposedly strangled them with bows and things, and that only was kind of half done-ish, and sometimes it wasn't done in all the crimes. So I will have to do a whole video one day on ones I actually find true signatures, but the majority of them don't have them. And getting into the guy's head, deciding that's his signature, like I heard somebody say in another program that the signature in this crime was that both women were they were blitz attacked, so that they were theoretically unconscious at the time that they were sexually assaulted. Well, first of all, I don't know that. I don't know that the person knows that. I don't know how you would tell that from that particular crime scene. depending on what order anything took, you could have a smaller attack that put them on the ground, and then they could have said, "Don't move or I'll kill you," and then rape them and then beat them to death with a rock, or they could have smashed them completely in the beginning, and therefore they were unconscious. I don't believe we know that, but let's say they both were knocked unconscious, and somebody was saying, well, that's because they like total control over them, and there have been Ted Bundy like that, and there's some people that serial killer that like to have he'd like to have his wife play dead when he had sex with her, and some people do give people roofies, so they're told completely out when they have sex with them. So, but what do we know what's going on in their head? Do we know if they like maybe they just don't want to have to deal with a woman at all, so it's just fun to sexually assault them when they're not getting any feedback, or maybe they do have a lack of strength. They don't feel like they can control the woman while she's conscious, or maybe he just hit her over the head too dang hard, but he wasn't going to let a good thing go to waste. This is where you don't want to get inside the mind of a killer, because you can't do it. And even if they tell you later why they did it, they're pathological liars. You can't believe them. So you have to be very careful of this. And I think too much criminal profiling out there in the world, promoted in television, but also promoted by certain criminal profilers, that criminal profilers can somehow psychically get in the mind of the killer and figure out what he's thinking. No, you cannot do that. And you can't believe them either. What you can do is look at actual evidence. The actual evidence at the crime scene, what does it tell us? Well, it tells us that the guy accessed women on a walking path, that he did likely live or work in the neighborhood. He had some knowledge of that path. So that's evidence. Using that evidence, you try to figure out who it is. All right, so now let's take a look at this guy, Ibarra. He was living right near the path. He had a violent background. There you go. And of course, they caught him because he was an idiot. So that was useful. In Rachel Morin's case, a little bit harder. Nobody saw this guy. There's no CCTV. What happened was it matched the guy in LA. But here, I'll just go into a couple problems with this, trying to figure out where he is now and who he is. All right. These guys, I personally didn't think they looked alike, although people on the internet are going, oh my God, they caught the guy that killed Rachel Morin. No, they didn't. And some commented on the hairstyles, like a fade on. This is a fade is a very common thing. So you can't base it on that, because people have fades. Now, you could look at if crimes are very close together and the guy didn't have time for his fade to grow out, well, then you might be able to have more ability to identify him. But it's not necessarily totally meaningful unless the fade has like designs in it and his name across the skull. That would be cool. Tattoos are always useful because most of the time they don't get rid of them between crimes. But they have this is kind of weird, from the LA case, it took them 6 months to come up with it from Rachel Morin. Remember, this guy committed that home invasion in March of 2023. Rachel Morin got murdered in August of 2023. So that's like 6 months there. Why didn't they have information? Why didn't they have the sketch of this guy at the time she got killed? I don't know. And why did it take? They just put this out just recently. So they waited another 6 months to put this out. And I'm like, what? Either this is really crappy police work, really crappy reaching out to the public. I don't understand it. But then again, I'm not even sure I believe this at all. And why do I say that? Well, they should have had this. If there was a person who pushed the guy out of the house, you would think she saw him. All right. Now, I don't know there's a whole bunch of different information about this particular crime, and whether that he accessed the crime through the back, or it was dark at that point, whether at some point maybe he was pushed out of the house, but the house was dark. Maybe she couldn't see him that well, or she was traumatized and couldn't come up with a face. Or some people say, well, maybe he's a gang member and they actually knew who he was and they didn't want to rat him out because they're afraid he'd come back and get him. I mean, there's people theorizing all over the place, but I don't know I don't know how accurate those pictures are, which concern me, because if everybody looks for just this guy, we might be in trouble for trying to find out who killed Rachel Morin. So I have to be very careful of that stuff. And we don't know, again, he's claimed to be Hispanic. And I think because maybe when he was in the house, maybe he spoke in Spanish. Maybe somebody in the house didn't know that he was Hispanic. He clearly is Hispanic. But here's another thing I want to point out. Oh, a Hispanic guy is in this crime, and a Hispanic guy killed this woman. So therefore, it's a Hispanic guy, so it's got to be the same guy. Do you know how many Hispanic people are in the United States? How many legal and how many illegal Hispanics we have in the United States? It's massive. And they're not just from one country. He's from Venezuela. She could have been killed by a guy from Mexico, Nicaragua, Honduras, Costa Rica. Do we have to name all the countries? Venezuela, Venezuela, Chile. You know, how many do we throw out there? We don't know where this guy came from. Have no clue. We don't even know if this guy. We don't know if he's illegal. We don't know if he's legal. We don't know if he was born in the United States. Just because he's Hispanic doesn't mean he wasn't born here. So you can't jump to conclusions in things. So in this case, I don't trust this picture. I question. And so don't look, if you know a guy that looks like that, who lives in Bel Air, Maryland, and came from LA or vice versa, yeah, turn him into the police. If you saw that guy near the bike path, or working in a restaurant nearby, or working landscaping or whatever, yeah, turn him into the police. Absolutely. But also keep in mind, this guy may look nothing like that at all. Not at all. So that's a problem. Right now, by the way, in LA, they've been checking with high schools, trying to find out if anybody, this guy went to high school in LA. I really want this guy also to be checked against high schools in Bel Air, Maryland, because there's no reason why I couldn't have gone to high school in Bel Air, Maryland, gone out to LA, committed a crime, come back to Bel Air. You know, or it could be from LA and came to Bel Air. We don't know which way it is. So I hope they're looking in both places, in high schools in both locations. Now, another thing, Bel Air is an odd spot. And this is a good clue in this case. LA is a massive Hispanic community. I'm in that Washington, D.C. area. We got a very large Hispanic community. Bel Air, Maryland, yes, there are Hispanics who live there. Not so many, though. It's a much smaller area. It's north of Baltimore. It's not a suburb. It's much north of Baltimore. So that is its own little place. It's not that highly populated that the Hispanic population is overwhelming. So this is meaningful to me because why is he in Bel Air? Now, if he were in D.C., I go, whatever, you know, good luck. But why is he in Bel Air? Either he's from Bel Air or he's got people in Bel Air. He's not going to just roll into Bel Air off a bus. That's not happening. You had to have a reason for being there. That's the biggest clue in this case. And I put out originally, let me see if I can find it. I think I forgot to bring it over here. Hold on a second. Sorry, I forgot to bring this over to my pictures. One more second. Okay, I don't edit my show, so you get what you get. I did this for the family, and it was put out in the community. And this one is that's the one in Spanish. So, and if you're watching the show right now, please feel free to take a screenshot of that. That's my the profile in Spanish, and this is the profile in English. And so, what I pointed out, I wanted to make tips for the case that I thought was more useful than, you know, to actually pick things that people could then determine whether I'm going to pull this up on my computer just because I can't read it. That's that writing's too small, but I do want to read it out to you just for the sake of it. Okay. All right, here we go. Now I can actually see it. All right, let me read it to you. The man is a suspected serial killer and a danger to the community. Serial killer, if you jump out of the bushes and hit people over the head with rocks and assault them and kill them, you're a serial killer. Whether we know who else you've done or whether you haven't done the second one yet. And I was always opposed to the FBI's idea that you had to have 3 linked crimes to call a guy a serial killer. I'm like, excuse me, why do you need 3? And so I argued this for years. I said, quite frankly, if it's an obvious sexual homicide by a stranger, I think you can go with one. But if you're going to push it, go with two. But why do you need to wait till three? And the FBI, I put this out for years. And finally, one day, the FBI lowered it to two. Okay. Finally. Okay. So anyway, the tips. Man is a suspected serial killer and a danger to the community. He may well commit more crimes. Actually, he will commit more crimes if he's not incarcerated or gets hit by a car. And if he's not from the U.S., if he leaves the country, some other country is in danger. A violent predator is a psychopath. And these are his following traits. I think identifying a serial killer as a psychopath is important because people live with these guys, work with these guys, but they don't recognize their traits as a psychopath. What are they? Narcissism, only he matters. A lack of empathy. Well, you can't do that with any kind of empathy. He doesn't care how other people feel. And that means if you're hanging around him or you're a family member, you'll probably note that the guy seemed to always not really give a crap about your opinion or your feelings, unless he was using you. He's manipulative. He will take advantage of others. And he's a pathological liar. They never can seem to always tell the truth. They always seem to have these small lies that they tell or big lies just because they like to manipulate people. So that's it. He's a narcissist, lacks empathy, is manipulative, and he's a pathological liar. That guy too. Absolutely same exact traits as this guy. How they behave in real life and use those traits that varies slightly, but the traits are the same. After committing a crime in Los Angeles, California, he came to Bel Air, Maryland. As his choice of location to move is odd, because it's not a major city location, he must know someone in Bel Air who he came and stayed with, or he grew up in Bel Air, or he lived in Bel Air before. Just between those two places, Bel Air is the most interesting one. The attack on Rachel Morin while walking on the Mompar Heritage Trail was likely committed by an opportunistic predator who happened upon her. This would mean he had some reason to be in the area or on the path. He runs on it. He uses go from one place to another. He works near it or he's living near it. He's in the area. He might have, how many times he's been on the path? I don't know. Could have been, theoretically, could have been the first time he walked on that path and said, oh, got lucky. But chances are that he's been on that path before, and therefore he knows how well it's used and all that. Maybe he's even seen her before because she liked to go there a lot. Maybe he saw her and thought, I'm going to hang out one day and see if she rolls by. And one day she did. He would not have been at work or home. He was not at work or home sometime between 6 p.m. and dusk on August 5th, 2023. So this is the time the crime is committed. So he had to be there, not someplace else. This is a picture of, is this the picture? Yeah, it was in this tunnels. There was tunnels along the path. That's where it happened. I'm not sure it's the exact tunnel. It's a picture from the media, but he was there, okay? So he wasn't someplace else. So if he was supposed to be at work and wasn't, or if he left the house at a certain time, he's got all those traits, and he was in LA and now he's back in Bel Air, or whatever. Hey, turn that guy into the police. Okay, definitely want to do that. Now let me put up the picture again. Okay, this is the one in English. I'll leave this on the screen for just a second so that you could do a screenshot of it. Okay, and this is the one in Spanish. So you can also do a screenshot of that. And hopefully, maybe, that'll help in some way possible. Now, it's been a while. Time is ticking on, and this guy hasn't been found. It may be that he's not going to be found by any profiling or any tips. It might just be that he commits another crime and screws up as badly as this guy. In which case, good, got him. It'll be nice to catch him before he does another horrific crime, because he's obviously extremely dangerous. So that's it. I just wanted to help you understand linking of crimes. Not that easy. And you can't do it by some of the methodologies that people seem to put out there that you can do it. Oh, the MO matches, the signature matches. A lot of times it's just simply not true. Would you look at the crime because they're similar? Sure. I mean, you don't not look at something, okay? I'm not saying you shouldn't pursue any lead you have. You say, wow, when this first happened, I mean, I can see, you go, another woman killed on a going jogging. And Georgia, it's not that far from Maryland. Hey, this guy came down from New York to Georgia. Why couldn't this guy come from Maryland down to Georgia? He could. So yeah, they could be connected, and certainly you look at them because they do have similarities. I'm not saying to ignore similarities. I'm saying don't jump to conclusions because of similarities, because those things don't always hold true. Just because this is a very common kind of crime, and unless the crime is so unique and so different, and it's like, whoa, we just got these two crimes and you can't believe how much is similar in both of these crimes. Who does this stuff? I will tell you one crime that is very true. Out in California, there was a serial killer. I'm blanking on his name now, but what he was doing was he would, in the sexual assault at the crime scene, he would cut up the women's clothing, not cut the clothing off their bodies because it was that he needed to get to the woman, but he'd like to play around with the material. This was a true signature, and it happened in more than one crime. Now, who does that? That was so weird. Well, the detective on the case wanted to go public with this information, and they fought him on it, saying, "No, we're gonna have to keep this secret just in case somebody, we catch the guy." And then he says, "This is what he did," and he chops up the clothes. He would know something no one but the police and the killer would know. We're going to keep this secret. Well, after a while, he fought. He said, "Look, we're just getting nowhere. Let's just put this information out." He did. Do you know he got a call from another police department way north in California from where they were, hundreds of miles away? And the detective says, "I don't know if this is going to be meaningful to you, but," he said something like 15 years ago or 20 years ago, "I arrested a juvenile for an assault, and he cut up the clothes just like this." And so the detective on this case said, "Hey, what's the guy's name?" He told him, and do you know what? They just finished interviewing him. Match. They got the guy. Because that was a signature. That's the rare signature I was trying to come up with. Chopping up the clothes like this. How weird is that? So that was something truly bizarre. But it's signatures like that, the tiniest fraction of cases, the tiniest fraction, so small. And so, but that detective did the right thing. I loved what he did. I've always said, hey, if you've got some information, if you're going nowhere in this case and you've got information that the public can help you with, give that information up, because you need to find the guy. And hiding stuff forever just so only the police and the killer know it. Well, hide the stuff that the public doesn't need to know. I don't need to know how she was. None of the public needs to know how each of these women were murdered. Actually, the information on their exact damage to their body doesn't need to be known by the public, because you're not going to identify somebody that way. But if they used a particular weapon, I think you should tell the public that, because they might know that that weapon came from their kitchen. Let's say they say, "Oh, this was the kind of weapon, it looked like this," and you open up your kitchen drawer and that knife is missing out of your kitchen drawer, and your cousin Ernie was acting squirrely. He wasn't around the day that it happened, and you saw him throwing stuff away in a trash can. And you go out there and find the knife. You want to give that to the public. So that kind of information, anything that will help the public identify, not just stuff that, it's not going to make any difference. If the guy stabbed the woman 17 times in the breast area, that doesn't need to go out to the public. So then if you interview somebody and they say, "Oh, yeah, I stabbed her like that." How many times? I don't know. Dozen and a half. All right, that's good. That'll help. So anyway, I just wanted to bring this to just more understanding to how you analyze these crime linkages, and in a more rational way than some of the fantastical ways that are put out there. So anyway, that's my thoughts on this. And I hope I'm glad they got this guy as quickly as they did. Thank God, but sad they let him in the country to run around and kill her, which was just pretty horrific. She had her whole life ahead of her. And ladies, again, stop running alone on trails. Please, or alone on streets, especially at dusk and dawn. Please don't do that. Please be sure you're in a place where you're being seen by people, because if there's witnesses, you won't end up dead. No witnesses, you may. Anyway, if you're new to the channel, please do like the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. I've got tons of stuff on this channel. Please check my playlist for cases I've analyzed, and I think you'll find a lot if you're interested in understanding crime scene analysis and criminal profiling. And thank you for being here. Bye-bye.